Good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone joining us today. On behalf of USAID and Resilience Links, I welcome you to our theme-month webinar on floods, droughts, and water security. How is water data critical to climate resilience? I'm Catherine Doyle with Resilience Links. Before we begin, let me orient you to the Zoom platform. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see most of your controls. First, please use the chat to introduce yourself and tell us where you are joining us from. To ask questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A button. We are recording this webinar, and we will email you the post-event resources. You will also be able to find the resources posted on resiliencelinks.org when they are available. And speaking of resiliencelinks.org, you can explore many resources, past and upcoming events, and much more on the site, and all of which aim to share evidence to help development and humanitarian practitioners apply resilience approaches to their work. Next slide, please. So let's briefly look at today's agenda. After some opening remarks by our host, the moderator will begin our expert panel discussion. We will then move into the Q&A portion of the webinar, and panelists will address questions that you have submitted using the Q&A button previously mentioned. And finally, we will hear closing remarks from the host. Next slide, please. Thank you again very much for your attendance, and we're delighted to have you all with us. I will now pass it to Pete Ipanchin, Senior Climate Adaptation and Resilience Advisor in the USAID Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security.
Thank you, Catherine. And hello to everybody who's joining us. Thanks so much for being here and taking the time. And of course, thanks to our panelists for giving us your time to engage in this important conversation. Also, thank you to the Resilience Links team for supporting this webinar and giving us the space to have the conversation today. So as Catherine said, my name is Pete Ipanchin. I am in Washington, D.C. with USAID and the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security, and I lead our climate adaptation team. Part of my portfolio includes managing a SERVIR partnership, global partnership with our NASA colleagues, and I'll explain that in a moment. The title of today's Resilience Links webinar is Floods, Droughts, and Water Security. How is water data critical to climate resilience? Whether we're talking about floods, droughts, or water quality, like whether or not the water is safe to drink, water is an important dimension to how many of us have experienced climate change and how many of us, people all around the world, will continue to experience climate change. The majority of climate impacts and disasters are water-related. Floods can wash away homes and critical infrastructure. Flooding can increase the spread of waterborne disease. Droughts can result in crop losses and crop failures, livestock die-offs, and this disrupts food systems and food security. So the losses from hydroclimatic disasters can be significant, including the toll taken on human lives and livelihoods. And these impacts hit hardest where climate vulnerability is high. This often means that climate impacts and the duration of those impacts are most sharply felt by marginalized and underrepresented communities. We know that while the threat of climate-related water hazards is real, we also know that there's opportunity in using weather data and water information to manage those hazards. Water data can be used to forecast floods so that communities in areas projected to be impacted are prepared because of advanced warning given to them. And water data can be used for increased food production. Water information can help people prepare for and control waterborne disease. So for the webinar today, we have a set of world-class panelists who will be exploring and answering the question of our webinar title by sharing their experiences in working with local and global partnerships and organizations in the use of timely and accurate water data to help identify and manage climate risks. Our investments of time and resources to bring data into water security, that happens in the context of our broader development objectives. And so the work we'll hear about today contributes to a number of strategies and partnerships and initiatives, including the USAID Climate Strategy, which was launched in 2022, the US government's Global Water Strategy, the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, which we call PREPARE, and the Early Warning for All initiative out of the World Meteorological Organization. And also, under the group on Earth observations, there's the GeoGLOWS initiative, which is very much dedicated to global water security. And so while the thematic undercurrent that ties all our speakers together is water, the SERVIR program is another commonality that all of our panelists have engaged with in a variety of ways. So SERVIR is a NASA and USAID partnership that works to help countries to manage and prepare for climate risks, including floods and droughts. SERVIR works with leading geospatial organizations and entities all around the world to strengthen the capacity of partner country governments and stakeholders to use satellite data, and oftentimes to pair that with locally collected data. And these data are used to address a wide range of thematic areas within climate adaptation and climate mitigation, including food security, water security, disaster risk reduction, air quality, and forest carbon management. So today's webinar focuses on strengthening water security and understanding and managing the risk of water-related disasters. We have many partners in our work on water, and this includes the interagency, USAID, NASA, NOAA, academic hydrologists that make up part of our SERVIR applied science team, and our SERVIR hub partners. Today we have with us SERVIR Southeast Asia with our colleagues from ADPC, the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, and SERVIR West Africa, Agromet. So to kick things off, I would like to give the floor to today's moderator, Chinmay Deval. Chinmay is with NASA and is the water security lead at the SERVIR Science Coordination Office in Huntsville, Alabama. Over to you, Chinmay.
Thank you, Pete, for those warm introductions and remarks. Good morning, everyone. I'm super excited for this opportunity to moderate this session on an interesting topic. Before we move on to our panelist, I want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Chinmay Deval. I am a hydrologist by training, and like Pete said, I lead the water security thematic area at the SERVIR Science Coordination Office. With that, let's turn our attention to our distinguished guests and panelists. Each of our panelists brings a wealth of experience and expertise to the table. But behind every scientist is a story of what led them to their passion. Could you please briefly introduce yourself and share that one moment in your life or career that sparked your interest in water? Let's start with Dr. Jamila Begu. Dr. Begu, could you please share your story with us?
Thank you, Chinmay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jamila Begu. I'm hydrologist, and I work as water security thematic lead for SERVIR West Africa. And I'm also leading the service on groundwater monitoring in Niger. I'm based at Agromet Regional Climate Center for West Africa and Sahel, and I'm based in Miami. So my little story about water science began with my passion with earth science in general. This is how I got my first university degree in geology. But after I have passed the degree, the school I was attending offered me only one option to continue my studies in mining. But I found the field of mining very limited in Niger, and I risked spending my life working for a single mine in the desert, which was not my dream. So I started looking for another earth science which has a close link with geology and which is much broader. This is how I found hydrology and how rivers behaviors depends on catchment geology. So since then, hydrology has become a real passion for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bagu. That is very inspiring. Next, Dr. Angelica Gutierrez. Could you please introduce yourself and share your story?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and a pleasure to be here. My name is Angelica Gutierrez. I'm a lead scientist at the National Weather Service of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration here in the US. For over 10 years, I have led environmental projects for NOAA and the US using United Nations frameworks like the WMO, bilaterals, and other frameworks like the Group on Earth Observations. My story, I'm originally from Colombia, South America, and during my childhood, my family lived by a river shore, and it was always traumatic when the rain season arrived because of the potential flooding. We didn't know how much water we were going to get or when we were going to be hit. So the fear of being washed off, and of course, all the afterwards issues of water quality was my driver to become a hydrologist and water quality expert. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. I'm sure a lot of people can totally relate to that story. Next, Dr. Sinaporn Michaya, could you please share your introduction and the moment that sparked your interest in water?
Thank you so much, Chinmay, and thank you for having me today. I'm Chinmay, and actually my journey into the world of water started with a love of urban architecture and nature. So when I began my career as an urban architect, I quickly saw how climate change was impacting my designs meant to improve life. Then this realization sparks my passions in me to dive deeper into the water issues. And that's how I became hydrologist and now also the specialist on the gender equality and social inclusions that would like to also integrate into this field work. And one of the most memorable moments in my career, also while I was working on the project in Nepal, when I start my career actually, picturing traveling to the remote corners of the Himalayas, talking with villagers about the flood early warning and risk management. And it was incredible to share the knowledge from the different groups, from the officers at the national level to the villagers. But one of the most unforgettable part that inspired me until today was seeing the impact of our work because of our effort. We design enough water to do agriculture, so then the communities and the women in the community can have enough money to send their kids to the school. I will never ever forget the moment that when the child ran up to me and said thank you in Nepali language. It was a powerful reminder of why I do this work. And thank you. I'm excited to share more in our discussion. Hands over back to you, Chinmay.
Thank you, Dr. Michaya. That's truly inspiring, and it's wonderful to hear your passion. Lastly, Dr. Jim Nelson, could you please introduce yourself and share your story?
Yes, thank you, Chinmay. It's a privilege to be here today and be part of this panelist and discussion. I'm Jim Nelson. I'm a professor of hydrology and hydroinformatics at Brigham Young University. It's really difficult to define a single moment that sparked my interest or passion in water. But I can remember living in the Dominican Republic in the 1980s as a missionary and recognizing the difference in infrastructure and in the possibility of not just water, but many different services. And I knew from that moment that I wanted to be involved in something where I could make a difference and be part of a group that could make a difference in delivering not just water information, but basic information to help people help themselves. And so I think that probably initiated a career of looking for those opportunities. And of course, I think that many of that came to fruition as I became part of GEO and also through the SERVIR program. I think that Pin mentioned very eloquently, the value and the satisfaction that we get in being able to see that what we're doing makes a difference for people on the ground. So it's great to be here, and again, a privilege to share this platform with my other colleagues and distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. It's inspiring to hear such diverse and passionate stories from each of you. Now let's really dive into the heart of our discussion. Our question is aimed at highlighting the practical applications of water data for climate adaptations. I'd like to ask each panelist to share a concrete example of your work that demonstrates how water data is really applied to climate adaptations. So Dr. Pegu, if you don't mind starting us off with an example of your work. Let's move on to Dr. Angelica Gutierrez while we figure out Dr. Pegu. Angelica, if you could start us off with this question.
Okay, my screen. I will talk about an example that occurred in Honduras years ago during the emergency caused by hurricanes Eta and Iota in the passage through Honduras. One of the priorities of the national electric company was to safeguard the life of about 23% of the country's population, and of course to minimize the potential for economic loss in the Valle del Sula. So as part of the approach that the electric company was doing to control the damages was to increase the energy production. So this was maximized, and the objective was actually to retain as much water as possible in the reservoir. So this was, the complications came because there were two, as I mentioned, it was Eta and Iota, between 2 weeks in between the storms. And so they reach out through AmeriGeo, which I will explain later on, and GeoGloss. They were able to collaborate with this effort and became aware actually that they will have 15-day discharge forecast. And by November 12th, the electric company decided to use the information that we were providing and actually develop a reservoir management plan, of course, with the priority to make room for storage capacity. This, with a series of releases between the storms, while also following the discharge protocols, they were able to control the damage and also control and have the reservoir or the capacity in the reservoir for the second storms. So this is one of the probably most meaningful stories on how information can be used to really base the decision-making process based on the observations and mitigate the impact of climate change. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. That is a truly inspiring story, and really how information can inform early action. Let's move on to Dr. Chinmay. Could you please tell us about your work in this area?
Yes, climate data to action. So as Pete mentions that ADPC Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, we are also part of the SERVIR Southeast Asia program. So our aim is to connect space to the village by utilize the geospatial information to cope with the climate change issues. So one of our important contributions that turn the climate data into the action is the development of our tools that leverage this technology. For example, in October 2020, Cambodia experienced one of the worst floods in the decades that affected over 790,000 people. So our SERVIR also provide the surface water information. So then the World Food Program, WFP, they also apply our flood information for their humanitarian response. So that also really using for saving life and aiding recovery effort. Another example is to build to this success. SERVIR we also recognize a significant need for the gender equality and social inclusions, or GESI, data that integrate to analyze the risk. To address this, our program, we also utilize the Big Earth data to develop the application. It's an open source web applications that enhance the disaster risk management. By this application will provide a multidimensional of the vulnerability data set that includes physical, socio-economic, and environmental aspects to the different type of hazards. So that example that has been also applied with the Mekong River Commission's MRC, that they utilize this information, integrate with we also provide the severity of the storms from the open source rainfall informations and help them to improve the flood bulletins for enhance the decision making and make an action to the right time and right locations. So that is an example that we have been doing using climate information. Turn to actions, Chinmay.
Thank you, Dr. Micha. That's very interesting approach to integrating GESI aspects into the climate adaptation actions that you take using Earth observation data. Let's go back to Dr. Bagu, if you can share your story.
Yes, Chinmay, sorry, I had an issue with with the sound. So yes, in my case, I also had the opportunity to use water data for climate adaptation in the context of the service on groundwater monitoring. So the objective of the service is to develop or to improve knowledge of groundwater availability first in Niger, so that this information can be used to develop groundwater irrigation as an adaptation strategy to cope with the reducing productivity in rain-fed agriculture due to climate variability. So we used data from the NASA gravity and recovery and climate experiments, GRACE mission, a satellite mission, to assess groundwater storage changes and recharge in southern Niger, in particular in the Lindenau Basin and in the Lake Chad Basin. So we demonstrate that the groundwater storage has been increasing during the recent past years in this region. We also used in situ groundwater level measurements to assess long-term groundwater storage changes, but this time in smaller areas like from two alluvial aquifers. And we use also a combination of well data and breast data to develop a mud flow model of the Gulbi Maradi aquifer and make prediction in water extractions. And the results showed that the extraction in this aquifer is sustainable even if we increase it with a rate of up to 28%. So I think these are promising results that could help government and communities expand groundwater irrigation to help improve food security in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bagu. It's really an interesting finding where you have surplus groundwater that you could use for irrigation. I'll pass it on to Dr. Nelson, if you could please share your example of how you're using water data for climate adaptation.
Thank you. Yeah, I have been burned in my memory this picture of a group of students from the Dominican Republic that early on we were helping to develop water data sharing standards so that they could use the information that they had collected from their river and rainfall observation stations. And I remember at the time you had to go to the National Hydrologic Service in paper with writing to get the information that you needed. And it took a period of months. And this was for a relatively simple study and a class assignment. And the effort that it took them to get that information, really was surprising to me. And so we were developing tools in our hydroinformatics that would allow the information to be put through web application and then shared automatically. And I remember showing that to them. And unfortunately, this was at the end of their study period. And so they had already gone through this long period of getting the data to fulfill their assignment. And I can remember them almost in tears as they looked to see what was possible in terms of sharing data. And so, fast forward a few more years and the work that we've been able to do with SERVIR and GeoGlows, so that now they can get information on every river and not just the limited observed data that they had, but a historical record of 80 years. And so SERVIR's motto is space to village. And it really is inspiring and to see that opportunity of taking the space and satellite and globally derived information, but then make it more useful and integrated with locally collected data so that they have confidence in it, and then make it accessible so that they can be involved in their own studies and help solve their own problems. And so I think that's a story that forever kind of motivates me in being able to help those that need access and the information, this water information, to solve whether it's droughts or floods or a variety of different water resources problems.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. It's fascinating to hear such diverse applications of water data in climate adaptations. Thank you all for sharing those examples. I'm gonna move to Dr. Gutierrez to talk about, if you could talk, you mentioned AmeriGeo and GeoGlows. If you could speak to what those are. Jim also mentioned GeoGlows. And you are an expert at convening regional decision makers for collective action. What is your favorite example of those, of how these multinational partners have advanced water security?
Thank you, Chinmay. I will start then briefly describing the Grupo North Observations. It's an intergovernmental organization with over 116 member countries, along with over 100 organizations, participant organizations. So GEO has regional organizations in the world. In Africa, it's AfriGeo. In Asia, AOGeo. In the Americas, it's AmeriGeo, and we have 21 member countries. All the regionals use thematic activities of GEO to address climate change and related issues. So one of those thematic activities is the Global Water Sustainability Initiative, also known as GeoGlows. GeoGlows is dedicated to global water sustainability and advancing in advances in hydrological science, with a very focus on the development and implementation of open forecasting system for water on a global scale. So the main activity is providing a 15 days hydrological forecast for over 7 million river network worldwide, as well as historical hydrological retrospective analysis also for those 7 million rivers. So GeoGlows is actually the perfect example of how a multinational and also multidisciplinary partnership is advancing water security. GeoGlows has continually been supported by organizations, including SERVIR, which is our stronger implementer partner, NOAA, NASA, with funding for research development. CANES also in France is providing support for research development. Brigham Young University is providing, we are leveraging their expertise in hydroinformatics. Other organizations like Amazon carrying the forecast and all the information on the web through the open data program, and so forth. And of course, the underpinning forecast of ECMWF in Europe. So GeoGlows, I would describe it as a partnership with ambition and purpose, because 7 years ago, when we started with the idea of providing this type of information worldwide, during our design strategy on how we would achieve this objective, we knew that only through multinational and multi-sectorial partnership, we will be able to achieve this goal. So this is perhaps one of the most impactful efforts. All these organizations come because the impact of this effort goes beyond our single mission as organizations. And so what we have done in the US through my agency, through NOAA, GeoGlows is at a different scale, of course, is actually doing for the world. And so I want to highlight here the role of SERVIR, because without SERVIR, we will not have been able to reach local organizations in the organized and form that is done. So excellent examples of how government organizations are using this information. We can find it from Malawi to Nepal, to Bangladesh, to Peru, Ecuador. So through the hubs of SERVIR, we have been able to connect a lot better with these organizations at the country level. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. That example, all those examples really highlight the power of collaboration, both national and international. And that's also a perfect segue for a question I have for Dr. Nelson. So Dr. Nelson, your streamflow modeling tool or modeling work is now being scaled up and replicated across the globe. Can you tell us a bit more about how you've tailored and refined this work to meet the diverse needs of global partners and communities? And if you have any specific examples from your work on the ground.
Yeah, thank you. And Angelica mentioned, the partnership that really is GeoGlows and has helped develop this global retrospective historical streamflow data on 7 million rivers that goes back 80 years, but also a daily forecast. And that really began out of a project that we started at the NOAA's National Water Center. And then through our initial applied science team project in Nepal, in South Asia, where we realized that once we could demonstrate its utility on a national scale in the United States, we could do it really on rivers anywhere in the world. And so we developed that in South Asia. And from there, it became apparent we could make it global. And but I think one of the most important things about it is the connection to the local stakeholders and the work that we've done primarily with the hubs of SERVIR, beginning in the HKH hub in South Asia, then in the Amazon hub, and now currently in the East and South Africa hub. But really it takes that connection of both the understanding, the use, the ability to use that information, and the pillars. Pete mentioned the Early Warning for All project, which has a pillar of good science in delivering the forecast and the simulated data, which we worked on. But that's not enough if you can't communicate it, if it's not understandable, if people don't know how to use the information. And so that's been a big part of the work that we've done with SERVIR. And it also then brings in those stakeholders with their locally observed data, whatever that is, because that information really helps us improve the global model. And that's now being used there's many examples. Angelica mentioned different parts of the world, but specifically in Ecuador, they now have adopted and used GeoGlows as a national water information system that goes out to the different states. It's being used not just for flood warning and drought, but also for design of there was one indigenous community in one of the states that used that information so they could properly and adequately design an irrigation system to develop water in that community. And so it takes that whole group from space and all of that technology to village and their local knowledge and need and adaptation and connection of that information in order to make it work.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. It's impressive to see such tailored solutions making global impact. Now I'm gonna ask a question to Dr. Bagu. You mentioned about how important the groundwater is in the region that you work in. So could you tell us a bit more about how in West Africa and the Sahel, the lack of sufficient information on groundwater as compared to the surface water limits the capacity of the governments and others to plan the most appropriate actions and to improve food security or access safe drinking water. And also, if you could speak to examples of how groundwater information, especially when paired with surface water information, has had positive impact.
Thank you, Chinmay. In fact, the lack of sufficient information on groundwater in West Africa and the Sahel can limit action to climate adaptation because of many reasons. First, contrary to popular belief, groundwater is the planet's most important source of fresh water. And this difference is even marked in the Sahel, where the number of surface water, so rivers and lakes, is very limited. And apart from a few towns that are located close to major rivers, all the rest of the population, including livestock, is fed by groundwater. So you see, as the primary source of water for the population, the livestock, and for many economic activities, I think we need enough information on these resources. But unfortunately, we see that more efforts and investments are made towards surface water. As an example, if you compare the measuring network for surface water data collection, it is more wider than the one of piezometers to collect groundwater information. So I think it is really important to have enough information on this resource, which is most important and also less vulnerable to climate change as compared to surface water, so that we can develop a management strategy in order to improve food security and also access to safe drinking water for the population.
Thank you, Dr. Bagu. That example is particularly enlightening. Now I have a question for Dr. Michaya. So you were at the recent SERVIR Inclusive Climate Action Workshop in Thailand, where you led the focus group on water and drought. Could you share what you heard from indigenous groups, women and youth about the need for water data and how best to share useful information for climate action?
Yeah, sure, Chinmay. I would like to address first that the reasons we conduct this inclusive climate action workshop, because of our experience, we learned that our information that we provide perhaps is a bit too scientific and the community or the people at the local couldn't really understand or access. So that's why we see the need that, hey, we should really understand the diverse voice to improve our climate information to reach to the people who are the most at risk. So at the Inclusive Climate Action Workshop in Chiang Mai that we, I think, conduct in the February. So we also leading the focus group on the water and drought. During the discussion, we also heard the powerful story from the indigenous group, women, youth, about their experience and need the local champions to share their story. And one of the most impactful insights came from the indigenous women's group as well. These women often bear the responsibility of securing the food for their families. So they told us that, hey, the information that you provide, if you make it more, how to say, user-friendly, to be able to let us understand so that you help them a lot to be able to use to better prepare themselves for the drought, especially to plan their crop and etc. They also emphasize that the social media was the most effective way for them to receive information, not the website, or even during their local festival where they gather and have a chit chat together, and that's kind of like the way that they can share the water and climate information. And on the other hand, the elderly community member also prefer to receive information through the local leader, the villager, the leader of the communities, or their own children, rather than using the website. So that's how we start to understand and try to analyze further that which accessibility that we should really develop to meet the needs from these people. The indigenous group also stress the importance that actually they understand the uncertainties from their own local knowledge, from their own indigenous knowledge. When we talk about the forecast rainfall 3 days, they're like, no, the government's not correct. Why they said it's gonna be rain, but it's no rain. But then when we talk about so how in the past they absorb this nature, so then they told me a lot of information. They observed the change of the wind, the animals, the wildlife in their livelihoods. But somehow it happened, somehow it did not happen. So they accept those uncertainties. So those kind of understanding that we should use also linked with our water and climate information for them to have a better understanding. So those kind of incorporate these diverse perspectives that we would like to understand the different needs and use that to improve our applications that we develop within the SERVIR C project to ensuring that it is accessible, understandable, and actionable. So while doing so, we should empower the community to take proactive steps, and we should also involve them into our development of our climate and water information as well. So that's what we learned, and we would like to also pick it up to improve our work further. Thank you, Chinmay.
Thank you, Dr. Michaya. It's crucial to hear these perspectives and ensure that they inform our strategies and the tools that we develop. Now, to end things on a positive note as we prepare for increasingly dire climate issues, what is an innovative or innovation or an initiative that you are hopeful or excited about? Is there a service or a tool that you expect to have significant impact on water and climate resilience in the future? Why don't Dr. Gutierrez, could you start us off on this?
Thank you, Chinmay. Of course, I'm going to have to say GeoGloss. Why the tool? Because the forecast actually is feeding into new developments. We have examples. So Our job from the initiative is only the forecast to guarantee that the information is accessible, that can be used in many other activities. So we have examples of other scientists and other groups actually developing very innovative applications. And I can give you an example in Lake Atitlan. Dr. Africa Flores from NASA is actually putting together or put together a forecast for water quality in Lake Atitlan, in which she uses the geogloss information basically to drive other information that is combined with satellite data. In Brazil, we have the same case for aquaculture. The state of Santa Catarina, they have a big production in aquaculture. And so they use geogloss to determine the salinity and how much fresh water is coming into the area where they are doing the growth of fish and other shellfish products there. So geogloss is opening the doors to so many other applications. We have applications for mining companies, for hydroelectric, and so forth, for food security, for irrigation systems. So is a base information that is opening the door to many other possible activities. And the best possibility there is inviting to those who are sitting here in this conference with us, who will be interested in that kind of information and get onto the information of data, of geogloss, and create new things. So that's going to be my example. Thank you, Chinmay.
Thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. That's very encouraging. And since you mentioned geogloss, why don't we hear from Dr. Nelson? What are you hopeful or excited about?
Well, thank you. I guess, yeah, I share that same interest in the possibilities that we have with geoglows. And I'll just mention a couple of things further. One is that it's part of the Prepare and Early Warning for All project that we're working on in Africa. And so I'm excited to see, one of the things we're trying to do is consider the broader pillars of early warning for all, and take the science that we've already demonstrated through the examples that Angelica have shared previously, that can now have a deeper impact by looking at the way to communicate information, the way that people respond, how to adapt that information to local needs. And so we're also, as part of that, GeoGlows has always been, have the aspiration to go beyond just stream flow, even though that's kind of the flagship element and information tool. We're now also looking with their Prepare and Early Warning for All to bring in the work that has been done on groundwater. And some of the applications that Jamila has mentioned are using data from GRACE are part of that. And working with my colleague at BYU, Norm Jones, and our students and graduate and postdoc students that are working on that effort, as well as the stream flow, to enhance and provide further water information that can be used across the water cycle in solving early warning problems.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Those are all very exciting and promising developments. Let's hear from Dr. Bagu. Could you please share your thoughts on what you're excited about?
Thank you, Chinmay. I think that the SERVIR network itself is a good initiative under which tools are developed to adapt to climate change, especially in the water sector. And certainly these tools will help improve population resilience to climate across the world.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bagu. Lastly, let's hear from Dr. Michaya about what she's excited about.
Yes, so what I'm excited about is the informations, the new coming, like from the NASA's WATT missions that will also provide the surface water height or the discharge. I'm really excited. Actually, so we'll see ADPC, we also early adopter to test, and we also seeing that those information is going to be very useful for our water management also in that sense. Also the geo growth version 2, we also excited to looking forward to utilize and use for our water resource management and flood management as well. Another thing that we also start to have a discussion is also about the SMAP, the soil moisture informations that is gonna also downscale to the higher spatial resolution at the 1 kilometers. And we see this as a potential to use for the different sector for either droughts or landslide, flood, or even for the fire forest management plan also as one of indicators that we gonna use. So that's what we are excited, Chinmay.
Thank you, Pin. It's inspiring to hear about all these innovations and initiatives. Now we'd like to open the floor for questions from the audience. If you haven't already, please submit your questions through the Q&A function, and we'll try to address as many as we can. So the first question to any of the panelists who would like to take it is on waterborne diseases in Asia and Africa context, especially in rural, poor communities with contaminated drinking water. What solutions do you recommend to tackle cholera and waterborne diseases? Um, if Jamila or Pin could take this, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, Chinmay. So actually, I may not work much on the waterborne diseases, but actually these issues start to be more, how to say, severe in the Asia region as well. So we start to collect the informations of the patients, of the people that get the impact from the waterborne disease during the flood event. Together with the temperature trends, that how the temperature also impact to those consequences as well. It's still ongoing of our kind of like a research and developments, but we also happy to hear maybe the experience from the Africa or the other stakeholder as well on this. And so we're back to you, Chinmay.
Thank you. Dr. Bagu, if you have any thoughts on it.
Thank you, Chinmay. So I think the question is more related to water quality, hygiene, and sanitation. And this is also a thematic area where SERVIR would like to expand its studies. But I think for a general knowledge I have about these diseases, it is first to avoid having maybe water or surface water or rainfall water stay in the urban areas because they constitute an area of development of the agent of transmission of the diseases. He is talking about cholera and also malaria. So I think we need to develop more sanitation in urban or residential areas in order to avoid contact with the vectors of the diseases.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Bagu. I have a two-part question. First part, I'm gonna throw it to Dr. Nelson, and So this is a tactical bit. How does GeoGlows differ from GLOFAS?
Thank you, Chinmay. That's a really great question, and I'm happy to explain that actually, the underlying forecast from ECMWF is identical between GeoGlows and GLOFAS. Which is the primary forcing, the meteorological forcings are identical. Originally, the GLOFAS used the same land surface model from ECMWF called HTESL that GeoGlows continues to use. What differed was the routing. So the routing on GLOFAS is done on a grid cell basis, and the way that you do that limits the resolution, in order to solve the routing globally. With GeoGlows, it's done on a vector-based matrix Muskingum method, which makes it very fast and allows us to provide a response at every river or the outlet of every watershed. And so in terms of the volume of water, the forecast, it's identical. GLOFAS now uses a different land surface model. The list flood is what they use for routing. They now use that as a land surface model. You would find at similar points almost identical responses, some differences in the routing and travel, but because the underlying meteorological forcings are the same, it's pretty much identical. The main difference is GeoGlows has the open data access and ability then as a service to get the forecast and the historical simulation for individual rivers at every river. And so I think the open data access is probably the primary difference, even though the forecasts are largely the same.
Okay, and could you speak more to the open data efforts of GeoGlows?
Sure. Angelica mentioned the partnership with Amazon Web Services. And so while previously in version 1, the data came through an open data service hosted at ECMWF, where the system is run. Now we have all of the information being stored continuously on AWS as part of their open data initiative. And so they've committed to storing that information, which should make it both faster in version 2, even though we've increased the size, but also the kinds of data that are stored, as opposed to having to get information on a river by river basis through the service. It can now be downloaded for many rivers at a time or entire watersheds, regions, or countries. And so their commitment to do that has really enhanced our ability in different ways to be able to share the data.
That is very, very interesting and the need of the hour. Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Also, regarding GeoGlows, is there a recommended model or approach to use the GeoGlows forecast stream flow to assess the potential conditions, flooding impacts to buildings or other ground features?
One of the works that we have had the aspiration from the beginning is to convert a discharge hydrograph, which as a scientist we understand very well, into a flood map, and not just extent but depth, so we can understand really and communicate better the potential damage to residential, to industrial, to buildings. And so we do have that kind of capability. It's not provided as a global service at this point because of the amount of data. I would also say it's something we're very excited about with version 2 because it is built on a new river network developed from a higher resolution DEM product, for which we now have the capability of doing better flood maps at a global level using the FAB DEM and the TandemX derived river networks. We're very hopeful that we can finally achieve a much better link between the forecasted hydrology discharge and the flood maps. That's something that will be coming out more with version 2.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. I heard Pin talk about this, but I would like to throw this question to both Pin and Jamila. What do you see as the role of grassroots organizations on communicating early warning information? Why don't Pin, you start it off?
Yes, the grassroots that we learn more and more from our work experience that is very kind of like our passion to make sure that the work effort that even we use a lot of our scientific method informations, it will reach to them and they can use. So to do so now, to communicate with them, it's not that easy, Chinmay. We are kind of like get used to speak our scientific word with the officers, decision makers. But once we need to really tone down the way we explain, tone down our grid information maps, graph maps to really make sure that the grassroots they can understand is necessary. So to do so, I think to understand the needs, different needs, the way they access our information, which channels, and what kind of a message that will make sure that it will give the most how to say benefit to them is very important. To do that, I believe that from the services now, we aside from this scientific work, we also now focus on analyze the gender equality and social inclusion analysis, see the gender gaps, the different social diversities, what are the needs, and summarize as a recommendations and develop the gender actions and make sure our application informations will integrate the JESI mainstreaming into our implementation works. So with that, those kind of steps that we now start, and then we're gonna now move into the actions to difference of our service on the anticipatory action for flood and drought, for the even air qualities, air pollution or the PM2.5 or the land use land cover change. So we will work with the CSO, the local stakeholders, bring all the diverse of the different group, youth, network, elderly, women, to really kind of like build up their first awareness to understand the climate change first. Somewhat they don't understand, and then when they realize the importance of the impact from the climate change, then we reached out to introduce the informations and hearing from them too, how they could perceive these informations. And with that, I believe that our work effort here, everyone here in the webinars will be able to reach down to the grassroots more. Yes.
Thank you, Pen. Those are interesting and important topics that we integrate JESI into our tools and our decision support systems. Jamila, do you have any thoughts on how you see the role of grassroots organizations on communicating early warning information?
Thank you, Chinmay. What I can add on what Chinmay said is yes, the communication to grassroots, or I will say end users, is very important to prove the usefulness of a tool or of any scientific information. So for that, we need to find the right media through which we can reach end users. You need to find the good message to send. And for that, we need to know how to translate the scientific information, the output of a scientific tool, to a simple message which can be understandable by the end users. I can give the example not on my service, but on another service developed by AgriNet, which is about seasonal forecasts. So month before the beginning of the rainy season, AgriNet makes what is called seasonal forecast to give the quality of the rainy season. If we want this information to reach the farmer, we need to really find which media can reach the most important part of the population, or the farmer and reach the farmer into his farm, and also which message to use. If we found in the subseasonal forecast that the year will be above normal, this is a scientific information. So you need to translate it into a way that the farmer can understand and take measures in the farming system. So I think the communication is very important, and after any scientific production, we need to communicate so that the information will be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Begu. I have a question for Dr. Gutierrez. So you talked about early warning systems. What more can we do to improve drought forecasting and prompt early warning information?
Definitely, we need to continue monitoring. And when I say monitoring is, you know, it's the funding of monitoring systems because of the cost in many countries are not abandoned, but are given a different priority, a lower priority. So definitely we want to encourage for organizations to continue monitoring, developing databases and monitoring that information, because that's the basis for efforts like global efforts like GeoClose to ensure that our information with your local information is actually accurate. So we want to promote to those governments and organizations, please continue the monitoring, how to improve the drought and response, better collaboration, not only at the national level, but also between or among national, regional, local, better sharing, data sharing, and so access to that information is important so that the responders at a local level can actually make decisions based on evidence, not just on feeling of is it going to rain or not, but so better collaboration within each of the countries and more data sharing. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Gutierrez. On the same question, I was wondering if, Jim, you had any thoughts on this, since there's a mention of GeoGlows, and you mentioned also that you want to expand GeoGlows beyond just stream flow and floods.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Angelica has mentioned is really critical, that link to actual monitored data that really helps us understand not just the flooding, but the low flow conditions. I also think we need the ability, to understand seasonal, subseasonal forecasting. That's an effort we're also trying to expand to be able to go beyond, the short and medium range, which really captures flood events. But to be able to have extended, I also think we need to continue to communicate uncertainty. The longer the time horizon, the greater the uncertainty that we have in hydrologic prediction. And we have to be able to communicate that effectively so that people can understand how to make decisions, based on that uncertainty. Certainly, it's a critical element. But having the information, I think this underpins the whole title of our webinar today, is we need the information. We need to have the historical information to know what's happened in the past, to know what our current conditions are, so that we can better predict and understand, from the context today of what might happen in the future. And so I think overall, we need the water information in order to be able to do this.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. That's nicely summed up. I'd like to, we're at the Q&A minutes, so I'd like to thank everybody who put in those questions, great questions, and also the panelists for your thoughtful responses. It's clear that our audience is just as engaged and passionate about these topics as we are. Now I'll pass it back to Pete for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Chinmay, and thanks to our panelists. So great to have your time and participation and experiences shared. So thank you to Angelica and to Jim and Pin and Jamila. We appreciate your words and sharing of your experiences greatly. Lots of information, lots of great questions in the chat, and we have done our best to put those questions to our panelists. We certainly weren't able to get to them all, but we have really, I think, tapped into a wealth of experience. And as we do enter into this, age of extreme weather events, where extremes are the new normal, our experiences are continuing to be like shattered and broken, where we see reports of new levels of record rainfall or flooding or drought or heat waves or fire, bad air quality, etc. And so we're constantly reminded of the root of addressing of how important it is to address the root causes of climate change and to mitigate climate change. Yet we're also reminded and experiencing the real impacts of what we've already kind of committed ourselves to in terms of climate change, and that to meet that, adaptation is really critical. And having the applied water data, water information to strengthen our systems of early warning and give strength, helping to reduce people's exposure, reduce their sensitivity to climate shocks and stresses, and increase their adaptive capacity to be able to deal with this all, helps to reduce our partner countries' climate vulnerabilities, saving lives and livelihoods. So we heard about how actionable information is really important in all of this. And oftentimes that needs to be tailored to differentiated groups of end users. And so those GESI considerations, the gender and social inclusion considerations in what types of information are shared, how that information is tailored to those partners is so critical. And we still have, there's been recognition of the gaps still in terms of where we have coverage on certain early warning systems and where we are still lacking coverage in early warning systems, and other points of information dissemination to strengthen our collective capacity for adaptation and preparation to extreme events. And to match that, or to sort of add to those gaps in coverage, we also know that there are gaps in adaptation finance, and that we need to be able to bridge those gaps in adaptation finance. So clearly, there's a lot more work for us all to collectively do. And I think that there was a question that I saw in the chat also about kind of the co-creation side and the coordination side for consistency in messaging. And that is really critical. And I think that something that was shared by our panelists that had come out here and sort of in the approach that SERVIR generally uses is a model of co-creation. It's a model of working together with the Met services, with the host country partners, with the stakeholders therein, to really understand what the needs space looks like, what types of interventions are already underway, and to match those needs with the capacities that we can bring, so that we are doing this collectively with our partners, and not sort of building, taking the science and the technology and doing something sort of internal, recognizing that, wow, with all this data, we can build this platform, we can build this amazing system of early warning, and then we put it out there in the public, and unfortunately people don't use it because there was never that sort of co-creation process behind it, and lots of assumptions that were never validated or checked went into those efforts. And so the approaches that we've heard about really kind of put that model away in terms of build it and they will come, and rather use this sort of needs understanding consultation process to be able to get to a place of supporting where the needs are being articulated. So to summarize, I would just say that, timely and accurate data are certainly critical to understanding and managing water security and addressing water quality and the continued increase in extreme weather events. So water data does indeed help us to understand and manage these risks, and we saw some real live examples of that today with our participation from our panelists and our skilled moderator. So with that, I will thank everybody again for your time and participation in this webinar. And again, thanks to our panelists and moderator and to Resilience Links. Thanks all.